Well, thanks for stopping by.
Well, thank you. It's good to be back.
We appreciate it. You know, you and I were talking just before we started, and the one thing, and we've had the chance to do this a couple times, to talk about songwriting and your process. And I've rarely run into artists who get as animated as you do when you start talking about songwriting,
right?
And the things that move you in music. So, in rolling the videotape way back to your, very earliest childhood, what is it that happened then that kind of inspires this passion for music? What were you hearing when you were growing up?
Well, my father was a drummer in the 50s, and his father played piano, and all of his brothers played instruments. And I just got that wonderful gift of rhythm and music at a very early age. And my mum and dad, for some reason, bought me a ukulele when I was 4. And they said I could strum in time with songs on the radio, and so they sort of said, well, I guess what you need to learn now is chords. And somebody said 6 is a good age for learning guitar. And so they had this little corner store that they ran, and this woman came by called Sue McCarthy when I was 6 years old, weirdly enough, and asked to put a ad in the window to teach guitar lessons. And they said, just teach our kid, and we'll put your ad in the window. So that's how it got started.
Yeah. And your dad had a record collection, a lot of great country artists. That you heard.
Yeah, because he had grown up playing music in the 50s, and then rock and roll, this new thing called rock and roll came along. He was obsessed with that. He grew up in New Zealand and played in a band doing all Bill Haley and the Comets and Elvis and Buddy Holly and everything from the 50s. And then so as the 60s came along and rock kind of diverged into all kinds of things, because at the beginning it was very rockabilly influenced, of course, And so there was a lot of people that kind of went different ways, and my dad went more of a folk way in the 60s, and then eventually over towards country. So that's how he ended up being a country fan.
And you did have, and we've talked about this before, a formative experience in seeing Johnny Cash. You were young.
It was my first concert, It was maybe 5, I think I was about 5. And my dad, it's a good age to see Johnny Cash, let me tell you. My brother and I, my dad bought us little Western shirts with little bowler ties and the whole thing, and off we went to see Johnny Cash. And what I remember from that concert, was just how loud the crowd was. And it was a 5,000-seat venue, which when you're tiny might as well be a stadium. And I'd never, first concert I'd ever been to, and I remember just the roar of everybody when this guy walked out on stage, and it's never left me, the power of that when he played the guitar and sang was just an extraordinary thing, that connection he made with everybody.
Yeah, well, and we were having a conversation earlier about Willie Nelson and that life force of performance. And what that
you
does.
use that term because it says he's 85.
85.
It's just still kicking ass out there on the road. It's unbelievable. And so inspiring, and as you said, it is that life force when you get on stage.
And that's the sense. I mean, that's, I'm sure, kind of what you were feeling even at 5, as Cash walks out there. And
I think it was more that recognition of this is the thing I'm meant to do. You know what I mean? I think it was more that. It was like, oh, this feels familiar.
So you got a guitar. Tell me about your early guitar heroes.
Just the guy that lived up the street, and the guy that played in the local band, and like all the unknown cats who never get props. I think more often than not, I think the local cats influence a lot of guitar players. Certainly in my case, they were unknown names that for me were like, I wish I could play as good as that guy. Wish I could play as good as Reg Grant. Or Dallas Southam and all these guys playing in cover bands.
You had one of the things I would love to do is talk to great artists and compile a list or a book of the names of their early bands, because inevitably they're fantastic. And there was a band, I'm not sure you were in this band, but there was a band named Fractured Mirror.
Right,
And you had something you got a guitar off the guy, or what was that story?
Yeah. I grew up playing country. Mm-hmm. That was what my parents immersed me into, and it was what I took root to. But I'm also listening to top 40 radio and just sort of loving everything, pop music, country music, just rock, whatever was being played. And sort of in my teenage years, got asked to join this band called Fractured Mirror, which was basically a heavy metal band. And they played Judas Priest and Saxon and Whitesnake and threw some AC/DC in there and so just Scorpions. And I didn't know anything about that music. And they already had a lead singer, so I just had to play guitar. But I had a Fender Telecaster and a cool little Fender Twin reverb, mm-hmm. and they're like, "Well, that's not going to fly. You need a Marshall stack." And and I'm like, "I can't afford a Marshall stack." But the singer had one, and so he loaned me his Marshall stack, and I was in heaven. It was like, plug the Strat into this Marshall, and off we went. So that was. I was in that band for about 8 seconds.
Moving on.
Well, because I just also discovered Ricky Skaggs and. Ray Flack, who was the guitar player on those records, was doing all this stuff called chicken picking, and I was obsessed with that. And so one night when I was playing with Fractured Mirror at this gig, one of only 3 gigs I think we ever did, we were playing some song by one of these heavy metal bands, and I busted out a solo and sort of started chicken picking through the Marshall stack, and the band's like, "What the," and they fired me. And so that was the beginning of my rolling conundrum. Musically. Yeah.
But there was a moment. There was a moment in 1988 when John Mellencamp came to Australia, and you've talked about this in terms of seeing him and making, kind of getting an understanding of a marriage, of roots music and energy.
Yeah. Well, and even more so because of that experience of feeling like I love a lot about country music, I love a lot about rock music, and I've played by that stage I'd been playing 5 nights in clubs since I was 15. I quit school at 15 and was playing 5 nights a week, 4 hours a night in clubs. And that's all I knew, was playing covers and slipping in a few little originals. But I was like, man, I love rock, I like country, I just don't know what I'm supposed to do. And it was on that Lonesome Jubilee tour, and it was such a fusion of styles unlike I'd ever heard before. And I went to that concert, and I just remember his band was phenomenal. Kenny Aroff on drums. He has this rock rhythm section, but he also had acoustic guitar, and he had a fiddle player. Lisa Germano was on fiddle, and he had an accordion, and it was just like this incredible fusion of sounds and styles and influences. And what I took away from it, I'm lucky that I got to meet John many, many years later, and I said, what I took away from that concert, I didn't leave that concert thinking, oh, I'm going to be John Mellencamp. What I took away from it was like, oh, just take all the things you love and put them together in your own way and make your own thing. That's what that concert did for me that night. It was really important.
And that through line would play throughout the rest of your career right up until RIPCORD and this record, in terms of kind of pursuing the things you love. Yes, there's a country through line there, but it's really very much about you pursuing what you hear, and what you want to do.
Yes.
When did you start writing songs?
I wished I'd started earlier. I wrote really crap poetry in school, little basic like juvenile poetry, probably about my girlfriend and stuff like that, and really rudimentary stuff. And then I sort of had the idea that I should try and put some chords around it, and So I think that was the embryo start of writing for me. But I was in a cover band in 1988, and I wasn't the lead singer. I was playing guitar and sort of a sideman. But we'd started writing songs as a band, and our own songs. And we had this big following as a cover band. And we were trying to tell the lead singer, let's slip in a few originals now. Let's turn the tide a bit, And every night that we would get to the set list, and it was like Moni and like all these cover songs, and we'd get to the original, the band would be so excited. The lead singer would be like, yeah, skip that one, go down to Freebird or something. And we're just like, ah. And so that was the start of me going away from that and going, well, I need to get my own band going and write my own things.
Yeah, yeah. And you, in '92, I think, made a trip to Nashville. And I'm wondering, here's a kid from Australia. Now, you might have been to Nashville once prior, but you made the commitment to go in '92. Were you, that had to be somewhat nerve-wracking.
It was exciting, because I'd always wanted to live in Nashville. I mean, I've grown up on the back of all my dad's albums. They all said recorded in Nashville, Tennessee, recorded in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm sure if they said recorded in Austin, I'd be living here. Yeah. It's just, that's just where everything was recorded. Yeah. So that's where I ended up. Yeah. But it was always the goal.
And you ended up there, and it was, the Nashville community, in terms of its songwriting process, is, kind of well known and well understood. There's this tradition of co-writing and working with others, and appointment kind of songwriting. How did you find your way in that, or did you?
Oh, it was really hard at first, because it's a weird phenomena. Walking into a room, meeting somebody, windowless room, couple of yellow legal pads and an acoustic guitar, and a stranger, and try and write a song. It's like it's so unnatural for me. I'd never written like that before, and it was very odd. But that's what my publishing company had flown me over to do, and they were, so that's what I did. Yeah. Drive down to Music Row and meet whoever and write whatever today,
And that went on. I mean, that was a struggle that went on for a little while. I mean, you kind of had to figure out what really works for you.
Yeah. Well, I was also learning, because I still, no matter how long I'd been writing songs, when you get to Nashville or Austin or anywhere where there's just a history of incredible songwriting, it's like being an actor landing in New York on Broadway all of a sudden. You're like, oh, I got a lot of work to do. Yeah. I could feel that.
Did you have a mentor, mentors, people who gave you kind of good advice, encouragement?
It's a good question, because a lot of the times I find myself going, how do you know which advice to take on and which to discard? Because a lot of it's crap. A lot of the advice is actually not right. It's just that person and their experience. I remember being in Australia one time, having come back from America, and I was playing some country festival, and I was backstage, and I was so excited about getting back to America. It was like just so exciting to me. And this older artist said to me, "Oh yeah, I heard you went over to America, did that thing, huh?" I said, yeah. And he goes, yeah, you got to get it out of your system, don't you? And I could have punched him. I just felt so infuriated at that way of seeing the world or feeling about what you do, because it was the antithesis of how I felt. Yeah.
You wanted to explore.
Just get out of my comfort zone and keep meeting new people and new environments.
Right, right. Which actually, also becomes a through line in your career in terms of challenging yourself and going beyond, I think, your comfort level. But in the process, kind of in getting there and getting to your first album, in '99, I'm wondering, especially in the early years, what's the strangest place you ever had to go play? Was there some just oddball place?
Well, yeah, there were. I mean, you play anywhere. There's plenty of you guys in here. You play anywhere you can. And actually, the first time, I'll tell you two stories. The first time we played Austin was actually South by Southwest, and at a place called Hang 'em High Saloon, I think it was. I don't even know if it's here anymore. It was a long time ago.
Long gone.
Yeah, and we had just, so we played there, and it was a blast. I had a great time and fell in love with Austin. That was probably 1997, I think, somewhere around there, 97, 98. Anyway, the strangest gig, the first thing I always think of was I had a manager that did some shoddy deal with some airline in Australia for free tickets if we did a gig for the airline, which sounds, what could possibly go wrong? And so the gig turns out to be in this little town called Tamworth, which is the country music capital of Australia. It's a big city now, but it was a little town then, more so. And it had a little airport, and I'm talking like a regional airport, where there's one baggage carousel, and and one tiny little terminal, and that's it. There's nothing there. And so we get to the terminal, and they go, well, this is where you're going to play. And I'm thinking, tonight, or for what, who are we playing for? And he's like, no, if you come over here, you know in the baggage carousel where the thing goes around and then there's like a little raised carpeted area, right? That's where we play. And on the one baggage carousel. And so it's narrow and thin, and we have a three-piece band. And so we set up the drums with just like a tiny bass drum, little snare and hi-hat, and that's it. And then I had a guitar, wireless guitar, plugged into an amp further over there, and the bass player did the same thing, little microphones. And we set up there in this little, in a line, and we're playing. It was absurd, and there was nobody there. And so I said to the airport manager, I'm like, so when do we play? He goes, well, just start playing now. I'm like, but it's like, it's 1 p.m., there's nobody here. He goes, oh, they'll show up. I'm like, show up, you know? So we start playing, and you know, some people came over, and then some more people came over, and we're playing, and we're like, this is getting pretty good, and we got a decent crowd. Halfway through the song, and all the bags start coming out. Everyone got the bags and left. So I just got on the thing and just went for a ride playing guitar, around.
So the key to the music business is know the arrival schedule.
Yeah, know the arrival schedule, yes, and read the fine print.
It's hard to follow that story. You did your first record with Matt Rawling in '99.
The solo record, yeah.
Yeah, your first solo record. But by the way, so you had a deal with the band, The Ranch.
Yes.
Always in your mind to be a solo artist?
Well, I always had been, but I'm a guitar player, so I've always had a band. You know, and the idea of just picking up sort of musicians in different places wasn't my thing. I just wanted to. So I had a band. I had a 5-piece band in Australia, but when I came to America, I couldn't afford to bring everybody. You know, so I thought, well, what's the minimum I can perform with? And I went bass and drums. I'll just 3-piece band. So unfortunately, the keyboard player and my rhythm guitar player were the two harmony singers. The bass player and drummer didn't sing. So I found myself in Nashville with my 3-piece band and me as the only singer of my band. And it was purely financial reasons. It wasn't an artistic decision, but we ended up being this 3-piece band for a long, long time.
Yeah. So working with Matt Rawling, first solo record, and we're going to talk quite a bit, I think, about the producer-artist relationship, because that becomes even more interesting as your career progresses. But I'm wondering early on, what did you learn in that experience from making your first solo record about songwriting, about that that central relationship between the artist and the producer?
I went through a lot of sort of named producers when I was trying to. It was really hard making my first record, and again, I've heard it from a lot of musicians where you go into the studio and it's really hard to sound like yourself in that setting. It's like a whole different world. And
is it because you're hearing like every great song you ever, you kind of ever knew, and you're trying to sound like those artists that you idolized in some way?
I think in my case it was hard to translate what I did into a studio setting, because I'd been born in a live setting, so everything was very live oriented. So suddenly being in that more sterile environment was not fluid to me at all. And particularly playing and singing with session musicians, I could never get it to work. It wasn't their fault. I always sounded like I was singing karaoke. And I always seemed to sing on top of the track and not be in the track somehow. I couldn't get in the music. And it was just driving me nuts. And I went from producer to producer to producer, and it always sounded the same. I just couldn't get what I wanted. So I said to my label, can I just use my drummer and bass player? I mean, they're the guys I use all the time. And so, yeah, that's what I ended up using on the first record that I did with my band. I just, used those guys. And then afterwards, met this guy, Matt Rawling, and because he was he's a fantastic piano player, he's not really a producer, I thought, I don't really need a producer, I need a really good player who I can collaborate with. And we can assemble the band, cherry pick the players, and put the studio band together. You know, so it isn't just like the A-Team or anything like that.
Yeah, and it was likely much more about kind of playing live on the floor, allowing you to kind of get inside the music, as
it was
you
just
say.
a huge learning curve for me.
Yeah,
yeah.
You know, you hear often, you know, these days about, you know, multiple producers working, you know, in one studio. Everybody's got an opinion, and when the track comes out, it's like there's no there, because there's so many people.
Right.
Kind of on it. You as the artist have to kind of keep that through line.
Yeah. Yes.
You know, it's not. You have to make sure that you're looking out for yourself, basically.
Yeah, and it's still. I mean, it's always a balancing act, which, you know, the great adage that balance is never achieved, it's just maintained, is so true in everything. And even in record making, for me, it's that the balance for me is in being very sure where I want to go and what I want to do and who I am, but also being completely open to someone having an idea that's completely different to mine, but actually is better. And this always comes down to the thing I struggle with as an artist the most, and I think it's true for many, is that when I create something, I can only hear it for what it isn't. I can't hear it for what it is. I only hear it for what it isn't. I hear everything that it isn't. Because in my head, it's fully formed. And so once it's out, I'm listening to everything that doesn't match what's in here or here. And so I'm spotting all this stuff. And just because that's different to what's in here doesn't mean it's not working. You know, 'cause you can have 10 people around you going, it's fantastic. And you're like, no, this is wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong, you know. And there's a balance between, as an artist, correcting those things, because that is where you want to go, but also knowing that, no, your idea is limited. Yeah. And these other people's contributions have actually made it much better.
And you were talking about being open to the possibilities, which is a really nice segue to, you know, your last few records, where you have really kind of pushed boundaries, worked with multiple producers and artists. And songwriters, you know, to achieve something, I think, deeper and perhaps more expansive than your earlier records. Is this now kind of part of your playbook, if you will, that is kind of the path, in that it isn't about the one artist-producer relationship?
It's happened very organically.
Yeah.
You know, we were talking backstage about the word intuitive.
Yeah, yes.
And I think it's a good word, because I think it's more intuitive, what I do. I don't overthink it. I just sort of flow towards people that I'm interested in, songwriters, musicians, producers, collaborators in all sorts of genres. I'm a mad Shazammer, so I Shazam all the time, tagging songs, always.
What is it about a song, particularly something that you might attempt to cover?
Right.
What is it about a song that attracts you? What does it have to have?
Who knows? Something makes you hit that tag button, you know? And it's the spirit, isn't it?
Yeah.
Usually. Someone was talking one time about audio quality and the importance of that. And we've got to get rid of this MP3 business because we've lost the quality and yada, 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 yada. And then someone said, what about if you, way back, if you have a vehicle that has AM radio, which I have this 1972 Chevy pickup truck that has an AM radio. That's all it's got, right? Yeah. And what is it when the thing is just off the station? Because you're driving, right? And you know, you're into the song and you're driving and suddenly the station starts to drift off and you're still hanging onto the thing and you're loving it. What are you loving about that? It's staticky, it's mono, it's drifting off, you can barely hear it, and you're totally loving it. What's doing that? It's certainly not the audio quality. Yeah. So I'm interested in more of that.
More of that, yeah. As you know, particularly, you know, starting with Fuse and then the last record, you know, bringing in multiple producers. I mean, you had a great run with Dan Huff and still work with him, but bringing in other producers and getting kind of input from lots of places. Does that help push you out, you know, kind of beyond your comfort zone, as, you know, the cliche would say, working that way to bring other people in?
Yeah, and it keeps keeps it fresh and vibrant, I think, and yeah, it's and very present.
Yeah,
it keeps it very present.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and you know, that's the other thing about the modern recording process. Speaking of being present, now you have the ability to infinitely tweak things, to change them, to add to them.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, at some point, because, and don't take this the wrong way, I sense you're a bit of a studio rat in that you could spend lots of time in the studio and be quite happy about it. Do you have to purposefully kind of restrain yourself at some point?
Yeah, oh yeah, there's a lot of stripping stuff away, and you know, there's always going to be things that I wished had been a bit more minimalism, and then other things I wished had a little more colouring put into them, but I don't know, it's an ongoing process.
Yeah.
You know, that's the thing. It's just an ongoing process, creating.
Yeah, well, and I love this description about hearing that, you know, you hear what's not there. Everyone hears how great it is.
And you know, the first time you hear it for what it is, about 10 years later. No, it's true. Well, you know, like if you hear a record you made, you know, or a recording that you did, years and years later, just spontaneously, that's the first time you usually get to hear it for what it is. Because you've kind of forgotten what you were trying to do. And a lot of the times you go, oh, that's kind of good. I like that. What? You know, and that's sometimes.
Do you listen to your old material? Like, do you go back?
I don't seek it out.
Right.
But if we're putting the tour together, I might go back and try and find some obscure album tracks and stuff that might fit.
Yeah. Speaking of tours, as you write songs, and it's one thing to, you know, create in the studio and, you know, make them great. Another thing entirely than to take it on stage. And I'm wondering over time, especially thinking about earlier material, do songs change? And I don't mean that in terms of, you know, well, we change a chord here, we do it in a different tempo or whatever. But the meaning, does it evolve in some way for you?
Yeah, do, yeah.
How so?
Sure. From a metaphoric standpoint, I think the songs can become just as relevant to me in my life, but for a different reason.
Yeah.
Because back before I met Nick and got married, I sucked at relationships and had I couldn't give myself to a relationship, and so but I would write these songs about love and relationships, and I remember writing this song called Somebody Like You, which was on an album I did called Golden Road, and I remember playing it for my girlfriend at the time, and she just looked at me and said, "You're a fucking hypocrite." You know, and I couldn't argue that, you know? I realized that I was writing from all these places of the kind of person I wish I could be. I wasn't that person, but I wanted to be, so I would write like I was, but I was only doing it in song. In real life, it was a disaster. And I think the only thing that's changed in my life is that I've more so become that person I was trying to be.
And it strikes me, whether you're writing lyrics or music, the need to be authentic is key to yourself.
Even if it's constant change.
Yeah.
If that's sort of, or conflict, confusion, that's all authentic too.
Yeah.
If that's where you are.
Yeah, and fodder for great songwriting, you know, oftentimes.
Yeah. Some guy, I was in a meet and greet the other night, and this guy said, you know, how do you write now with no adversity in your life? I was like, well, first of all, I don't know anybody that has no adversity in their life. You know, so it was an interesting question, because I thought, well, first of all, it's interesting that you think you have to have adversity to write from, which I don't agree. But also, shit, I mean, who hasn't had adversity? If not as much now as back then, there's a lifetime of stuff to draw from in the well. Yeah. But also, you can write from a place of, for me personally, of gratitude and hope and want, and, you know, a lot more things. I think there's just a lot of things to write about. Yeah.
I heard a terrific interview with the great songwriter Lucinda Williams. And she too, later in her life, found her life partner, her husband, and they're very happy. And somebody asked the same question, well, what are you going to do now? that you're happy. And she responded by saying there is a deep, deep well of all the experiences in my life. I got plenty to go back to.
Yeah, if you choose to do that.
Yes. Yes, exactly. But she just completely dismissed the notion that happiness then means you can't create. Going back a little bit to recording and studio work, the sonics of your songs are now thoroughly kind of modern in their construction. How do you kind of stay connected to technology, particularly in the studio? Are you always kind of chasing the next sort of coolest thing in piece of gear or whatever to help you create, or do you ignore that?
Everything's fair game. In my world. Everything is happening now. I probably listen to new music far more than anything else. I'm more intrigued and compelled and inspired by new music. And then there's certain old records I'll go back to and marvel at certain things, how things were done. But this, for me, this is a really fascinating time as a musician. And it gets into a whole broader conversation about what qualifies the title of musician these days, in the EDM world particularly. And I'm a big believer that it's all still musicianship. If you're doing it in your MacBook Pro, whatever you're doing, and if you don't play an instrument at all, and there's plenty of guys I know who write and they don't play any instrument, wouldn't know what a C is from a D, wouldn't have a clue, but they still have to compose these things like a painter, putting paint together in such a way that it makes a compelling image. That to me is as valid as a guy sitting there playing guitar and playing drums. I don't discard that. Like so many people do. I think that's wrong. And there are elements of that you've incorporated into what you do. I'm sort of almost love to collaborate with people that don't really play instruments, because that sort of it's so liberating. Well,
we were talking about songwriting and working with Julia Michaels, and that remarkable process, or whatever it is she has, that intuition to just throw things out and then disappear.
We've written a couple of songs on the new album. The next single that's coming out is one we did, and she actually sings on it too.
Right.
But she's just so gifted.
Incredibly. And hard to, I've had the chance to talk to her, hard to describe, exactly how she does what she does.
She channels.
Right.
Amazing.
So we've spent a good deal of time today talking about collaboration. Your work with producers, your band members. What is it about you that makes you a good collaborator?
You'd have to ask them. I don't know. First of all, the want to collaborate.
Yes.
And what I want to find, if we do something, I know what I do, I know what you do, but I don't know what we do. So I'm interested in that third thing. When I worked with Nile Rodgers, it was someone I really aggressively sought after, sought out, because I wanted to find him and create with him. So I've always loved his playing. I love his record making. And so I just said, I think if we can get in a room, we can do something really, really fun. And it was awesome collaborating with him for that very reason. Because he did what he did, and I do what I do. And we just played long enough for this third thing to sort of emerge. That's what I love about collaborating.
And I imagine it also has to be about, being open. You have to, and especially, someone at your level, 2 decades or more of remarkable success. I mean, I went through the numbers in the open, 23 #1 singles. That doesn't happen by accident, and it doesn't happen in a year. It happens over a period of time. So keeping that level, you have to, I imagine, remain open to the possibilities. You can't get locked into one
and
thing.
Also I've heard it said one time, humility, the definition of humility is remaining teachable, and I think that's a good definition for that. And I'm just curious. I'm curious, and I'm hungry, and I'm passionate about creating and where it can go. and using everything that's here right now and people and all demographics and lengths of time in the trenches, if you will, because everything is valid and can bring something.
And I think part of the remarkable nature of your career is, as you've done that, your audience has come right along with you.
Some of them.
Yeah.
You know, you're not going to keep everybody because it's not everybody's thing. I mean, and I'm okay with that too. You know, you make music and it finds people who connect with it, and then the other people who go, I like the record before that. I don't really care for this one. That's okay. That's all right. You know, you can't beat that over someone's head. You must like this. It's like, no, I don't have to like anything. I'll tell you what I like. You know. It's just, it's very fluid. Yeah,
and these days the interaction with your audience is much different than it was when you started.
Well, I'm sober now, so that helps. Helps in a big way.
That makes you more articulate, certainly, when you're talking.
That's right. So I remember the show.
I talked to an artist once. I was extolling the virtues of something that he did in like 1975, and he looked at me and said, you know, I really don't remember the 70s very well.
Yeah, I remember playing a show one time, and very early on in my career, and this is why you also have to have people around you that kick your ass and tell you the truth. And I came off stage and I was like, that audience was terrible, and the drummer goes, you ever think it might have been you? And he just walked off, and I was like, oh my God, he's right, it was me, you know, and so. Got to have those people too.
Yeah. But these days, speaking of getting feedback, though, these days, social media, you know, you're interacting with people in a way that, you know, 10 or 15 years ago, you would not necessarily have been doing. And I'm wondering what, you know, in terms of what you put out, what you post, what photos or whatever, are you thinking about, you know, kind of what people might be interested in? Are you curating as you go?
It's a tricky time right now with creating, because the self-awareness is very dangerous. Yeah. It's a very dangerous thing, because ultimately we're critiquing while we're creating, and that's just death. You can't. It's a very dangerous thing. I think it has to be fluid. The way I approach everything is like, just do it. We can scrap everything after the fact, but let's do it and not think about it too much. And I learned a lot of that from my wife. That's how she approaches scenes in her acting. She'll like, I'll try anything, do anything, just everything is open, and it'll be very apparent if it sucks. And we won't do that anymore. But you have to try it, because in that thing that ended up being completely a failed attempt, there might be one little thread that was like, that's interesting. Follow that a little bit more. Discard everything else, but follow that thing. That thing was interesting, and I would never have discovered it if I wasn't, you know, dare to suck, basically.
Right.
And you can, but this self-awareness thing right now, it's a very delicate balance.
Yeah, hard for you to kind of find your place in that and be kind of appropriate.
Well, and also the fact that it gets so cerebral. That's a danger too, because it's not. Who knows where all this stuff comes from? It's from the heart. It's from the cosmos. I don't know, wherever, whatever you believe in. It's very mystical and magical. It's like, it's alchemy. I mean, you're making something out of nothing, and suddenly a song exists. That blows my mind that can happen. Especially as a man who can't bring a child into the world, I can bring a song into the world. That's an amazing feeling. I can bring something that will live on. And so I have a lot of reverence for that. Anyway, I just went off on a tangent.
And a good one it was.
Yeah.
And thinking of you know, kind of that bringing a song into the world, then presenting that song to an audience. How much are you thinking about the audience as you're preparing for a tour? What goes through your mind?
Well, I mean, for a tour, a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, without them, it's just one long sound check. Thank God the audience shows up.
Yeah.
And it's us. I'm here to try and create an experience for all of us, and the audience can end up doing the same thing.
Well, it is very much about, you know, we're kind of all in this together.
All in this together. Yeah, but it has to start with me giving energy and giving everything to the audience. And if they give it back to me, then we start the loop. And the loop can just go and go and go and go. And it's effortless for everybody. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
But it's when you know, it has to flow. If it stops either here or stops there, the thing starts to just wobble.
You're a husband, you're a father, you have, you know, multiple responsibilities, you're, you know, juggling lots of different things, you know, in your life in addition to being a musician and an artist. How do you kind of stay present and not be,
I'm sorry.
you know,
it's
thank you very much, good night.
I'm not always, I mean, I screw up, you know? It's that the only difference now between who I was 10 years ago, or a little longer than that, is I admit the mistake and try and do something to correct it as quick as I can. And
Own it.
sort of try and defend it and justify it as much as I used to. But that's the only difference, because it goes out of whack, you know? It's putting a schedule together when you have a family, but is still a touring musician, and a wife who has a career, working sometimes very sporadically. I mean, my tour, I know my tour a year in advance. Nick might get a film with a very short notice, and suddenly we're all going to New York for 2 weeks to shoot a film, which just happened recently. So I've got this weird thing of needing to be set with what I'm doing, but very, very malleable in every little space that I can be.
Yeah. Does it affect your creative process? I mean,
I'm sure it does.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, but it's made it very, probably chaotic in some ways. And actually, I think that's why working with multiple people has ended up being a good thing. Because if I work with 6 different people, and next Tuesday, suddenly, I'm going to be in Los Angeles for the day, there's a handful of people I can call to say, hey, can we work on that song? And if that person's busy, maybe that person's available. Maybe so it's actually worked out to be kind of good for that.
You know, we were talking about social media and your family life, and there's a very, you know, these days there's a very fine line there about what you put out and what you don't. Important for you to keep that side of your life out of your social media outreach.
Yeah. Nothing to hide and everything to protect.
Yes.
Is sort of the mantra that Nick and I have.
Yeah.
And just trying to keep a normal family life as best we can. And but not feel like you're hiding anything. Yeah. But you're protecting certain things. And you have a right to protect things. Too, you know?
Yeah. What do you so you've got a record coming out. We talked you know, a little bit about it. What is this as you're finishing it? Is this a nervous time as you're finishing a record? Is it you know, kind of more stressful to try to get it to the finish line?
It's whatever I let my head tell me is going on at the end of the day. You know what I mean? Like, because it's like I have a very good sponsor, and he said to me, Keith, do you know how much people think of you? I said, how much? He goes, rarely. And it's the great leveler in all things, because it's so true. Yeah. And so if I find myself getting nervous or anxiety about the record, I go, it's not rocket science. It's like, we're not curing cancer. We're just making some music. It's all good. Just chill out. Yeah. And then I'm fine. Yeah. It's the stupid ego that gets, you know, anxiety driving and all. It's just noise. It's just noise. You know, I'm just trying to put some good in the world. Yeah. That's all I'm doing. Yeah. And then people do thumbs up, thumbs down, whatever. It's like, you just got to put good in the world, right? Yeah.
So fair warning, we're going to ask for some questions for from the house here, and we've got microphones if you care to line up. You know, now as you said, putting good in the world, that's the point you're at now. Is that the most, you know, kind of the important thing? Yes, you want you know, make hits and make songs as, you know, as good as they can possibly be. but it's really about, I think, if I read you right, uplift. It's uplifting people.
Yeah, but I think I've always liked that. I mean, I think I was the peacekeeper in my family of origin. You know, I was trying to keep the peace.
Yeah.
And that's a good. That makes for a good entertainer, I think. You know, trying to bring everybody together. That's what I've loved about playing live.
Yeah.
That ability to, and that opportunity to have everybody in agreement just for 2 hours, because it's pretty rare.
Yeah.
Rarer than it's ever been.
Yeah. And one of the things that you've done, and I know this a little bit from personal experience, you go out and play and support causes that are important to you. You know, you always show up. Why is that kind of involvement for you important?
When I was 10, our family's house burned down. And we were okay, because I was at school at the time and my brother was, but we lost everything. You know, the whole place was just burnt, done. And that like really hit me. But we were members of this country music club called Northern Suburbs Country Music Club that you could just join if you loved country music. And so my parents joined up this club. They were the first people to put on a fundraiser day for us as a family. It's like what a church would do.
Yeah.
You know, they were like our church basically, and they put on this to try and get us back on our feet. I remember Goodwill giving us some clothing, the Red Cross giving us some clothing, and friends letting us stay at their houses, and just everybody chipped in, and I saw this spirit in action at a young age, and it's always stayed with me.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I can certainly speak from personal experience with the organization, our sister organization, Music Cares, and you've been remarkably generous and supportive.
Well, MAPS, you know,
yes,
paid for my first rehab.
Yeah. Oh my God. Okay.
You know, in 1998.
Yeah.
And so that was it. From that day on, I'm like, I'm going to give money to these guys. This is a good cause right here for musicians that need recovery that can't afford it.
Right. Right. So, questions right here. Yes, sir.
Okay. Hello.
Hi.
Thank you, Keith. I'm a big fan. Luciano from Brazil. And,
Hi.
Yeah. I would like to know, we heard a lot of stuff here about music and blockchain and tech and all these things that are going on. I would like to know what you think about that, and if you ever been to Brazil too, and if you want to collaborate with the music scene there too. But so tech and the Brazil stuff.
Okay, so firstly, I was just listening to, I have the Radio app. I don't know if anybody's got that, Radio with 5 O's. It's a fantastic app, so I can travel around the world, listen to music in multiple continents over multiple decades. And I was listening to Brazil in the 70s this morning, getting ready, so there you have it. I hope I get to play Brazil, it'd be good. What was your question about music and blockchain?
Blockchain technology.
Yeah, we heard a lot of things here in the South by Southwest about music, the music industry, the blockchain, and the tech, and how this is going to change the industry. I want to know if you're looking for that, if you're kind of into that, or your record company, and what do you think about that? How you think that is going to change the industry? You know.
Well, I don't quite understand.
I think it's a distribution thing, using blockchain technology to distribute music. Am I right?
Yeah,
okay.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I only know this with Bitcoin, right?
Right.
Blockchain technologies. So.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I guess more from a copyright standpoint concern, you mean, or?
More from a copyright standpoint.
Yeah, and I don't know enough about that yet to know. You know?
To be continued.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so thanks.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Hi. I'm wondering, so when you record The Fighter, let's say, and you're listening back to it in the studio, did you know that song was going to be a smash? And likewise, do you ever listen to songs and you go, this is going to be a smash, and then maybe it's not the single, or you go, oh, this is the single, or you know, like anything like that?
I think all the above.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good. My experiences have been all the above. Songs that I thought would do really well. But also, I think I'm learning to redefine what really well means for songs, particularly now, because there's so many ways songs can succeed in a place where they didn't somewhere else. Maybe at radio, you can have a song that's multi-week #1 at radio, but nobody really downloads it or streams it. They just love hearing it on the radio, so they keep requesting it, and the song doesn't really do anything. Another song that might stall at radio, and yet it streams phenomenally. I've had that experience. Songs that play amazing in concert and yet struggled on your album, and just every weird combination of songs. So I think there's so many ways to define whether a song is successful or not. At the end of the day, I think if someone comes up like you just did with that and comments on the song favorably, that's successful to me. Yeah. I know with The Fighter, we wrote that, Busby and I wrote that in London, and we whipped up a quick demo of the song, and I sang a scratch vocal, and basically the idea was we were going to go back to the States and make a proper record, and we just couldn't beat the spirit that we felt was in the demo. So that's the demo, basically. You know, Carrie was recorded in the States, but everything else was recorded in London, and it's the spirit of it, you know.
That seems to happen often, or a fair amount, where you seem to always be chasing the demo until you finally decide, no, it's the demo.
Yeah, and someone talks about, you know, demo-itis, so people have heard that, like you get demo-itis. You get, and producers have this issue all the time because they're like, oh, God, stop listening to the demo. You know, I don't know the demo, let's make a great record. And you go, I think there's a reason you have demo-itis. It's because the thing still sounds kick-ass. Listen after listen after listen. If it didn't, you wouldn't have demo-itis. Yeah. So there's something in there, right? And I just think sometimes, I think Mark Foster has a great story from Foster the People about Pumped Up Kicks, where same thing, he kind of banged that thing out, just mucking around, and he was going to fix everything the next day and write proper lyrics and replace everything, but it was just felt so good he left it like it was. So I think that's part of it, is knowing when to leave things alone.
Thank you.
Cool. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Hello, Jake Brooks. I'm from Ohio. Big fan.
Hi.
So more of a personal question. I've got a copy of RIPCORD with me. Would you mind signing it?
Sure.
All right.
Yeah. Thank you.
That was bold.
Yeah.
That was very, very bold.
I bought this pen off a worker at Starbucks.
How you doing, man?
Pretty good. You too.
And Dave, did you say?
Jake.
Jake. Okay.
You know, I'm not sure I got a hug.
You guys just talk among yourselves.
Yeah.
I'll give you a topic. Do penguins have knees? Everyone's thinking. Thank you, Jake. Nice to meet you, brother.
Nice to meet you, too.
Yes, ma'am. You don't have something to sign, do you?
No, I don't have anything to sign, but my husband is the principal timpanist of the ACO. And
the principal
Australian
what?
Chamber Orchestra. The Australian Chamber Orchestra, the
principal
timpanist.
Okay. Yeah.
And I don't know, I'm sure you're aware of Richard Tognetti being very open to merging genres with his orchestra.
Okay.
And it
I
just
didn't, but I do now.
Okay. Do you know Richard?
I don't.
Okay. It occurs to me, he's done lots of stuff with things like, you know, people like Peter Garrett and people like that. And it occurs to me that that's something that you should do.
I'm up for it. I'm up for it.
I mean, based on your openness to collaboration, and I think, you know, it's something I think you should check out and talk to Richard about.
Duly noted.
Duly noted.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do.
Publicist for the Australian
and
Chamber Orchestra.
And it's one of the things. It's one of the things I think the Grammys have always done very, very well is made collaborations.
Yes.
The most unexpected collaborations that are amazing.
Yeah, part of the show.
Yeah.
Part of what we do. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Julie from Dallas. And
Hi, Julie.
earlier you alluded to that you had gotten some advice and just trying to figure out which is the best to take and which to ignore. Can you think of like what the best advice you've been given in the music business and what the worst was?
That's a good question. I'm still working on that. A guy said to me, I was struggling a lot in the early days in Nashville because of what I did just didn't fit. And so I was like, well, do I change so that I can fit in and get some traction? Or do I stay true to who I am and what I am and never seem to get any traction? I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And anyway, I did a show one night, and this guy came to see us who worked for Sony Records at the time. He used to come and see our band every time we played. And I came up to him afterwards, and I said, you here every time we play? And he goes, yeah, you know. And I said, and you work at Sony? He goes, yeah, well, I mean, I love you guys. That's why I'm always here. I said, why don't you sign us? He goes, I'm the only guy that loves you guys. And I said, why is that? What are we doing wrong? And he goes, you're not doing anything wrong. He goes, you're just really unique, and it'll be your biggest curse until it becomes your greatest blessing. And as cheesy as that might sound, boy, that night, it just went right to my core. And what I took from that was like, stay the course. Just stay the course, and it's just going to take time, but stay the course, you know. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Hi, Keith. Brandon from here in Austin.
Hi, Brandon.
First, thank you for bringing a lot of good into the world. Thank you.
Hey, welcome. There's a lot of good in the world.
It's not so much a question, but it's more of a request for a possible song for you to cover. Every time my wife and I hear it, we hear you. And it's Nobody's Fool by Kenny Loggins.
I don't know that song.
It was from Caddyshack 2.
From...
Oh,
well, yeah,
okay.
that's...
I know. Like,
you know, you were doing fine until you got there.
I know. On its face, it sounds bad, but we hear you when we hear the song. So
well, thank you.
Maybe you want to give it a listen.
I'll check that out. I've got a lot of things to check out after the show.
Yeah.
This is good.
Thank you.
Timpanis and thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah. I like Kenny.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Hi, Keith.
Hi.
This is Adrian from France.
Hi, Adrian.
Just wondering, when are you going to play in France? As far as I'm aware, you've never played in France.
When are you going to France?
Yeah, we've never been to France. No, there's a lot of countries we haven't gotten to tour yet. So I don't have an answer for you, except the want to play in France at some point.
Well, you're welcome to come.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we're running down on time, so.
Hey Keith, this is Jerry from Toronto. I was just wondering if there's a newer artist that's not in country or rock that you're really into and you really like music of.
Post Malone, because he's just not. He's got his own thing. It's insane. I don't even know what it is. I don't even think he knows what it is, which is beautiful. And it's just an incredible fusion of things. Singer-songwriter, hip hop, R&B. Soul, it's just all in there, and I love him immensely. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Please.
Hi, Keith. Mark here.
Hi, Mark.
Also from Canada. We seem to be all on the road here. Toronto and Vancouver. But quick question. I'm a songwriter from Vancouver, and you talked about how, you know, the challenge of getting what's in here out in the best form you can. And how do you manage, you know, bringing other people into the collaboration, other players, and not trying to control too much what they do with their parts and putting together the final product? How do you kind of approach that control challenge in your mind?
It's a great question, because it is that balance that, for me, just has to be, sometimes it's just time. Sometimes it's just time. One of the things I love about record making is having time, if I've got it. To be able to live with something for a while, so that it either keeps holding up or it starts to fall apart. And if it falls apart, why? And sometimes I've found that it's falling apart because I've heard that before, and I realize I've heard it before because I drove the session too hard. There's too much of me in there. And so then but I keep every version of everything that we do, and I can go back and go, this version was way better, and there's more of that person in it. So, I mean, I don't know, it's just a feeling. That's all it is.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, and people around you that can weigh in. You've got to have those sounding boards, you know. There's a great, what do they say? Often when we ask someone's advice, we're not so much soliciting, when we ask someone's opinion, we're not so much soliciting advice, it's we are seeking an accomplice.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is so true.
Exactly. Yes.
Hi, I'm Lisa Friedlander. I'm from Houston.
Hi, Lisa.
I'm a huge fan. I love you so much.
We just played Houston last night.
I know, at the rodeo.
Yeah, it was fun.
I love you. I've seen you at the rodeo. I've seen you in concert. But I promised my son-in-law, he's a Kiwi. He was born in Wanaka, New Zealand. He did his ancestry. And y'all are third cousins. Your great-grandmother, Harriet Edwell Clark.
Why am I singing Billie Jean?
Yeah,
right now?
And his great-grandmother, Ann Turner Clark. Mark, whom he knew very well, she lived to be 100, were sisters. And his name is Matthew Gregg, and he's in a band called Western Youth, and they're playing right now at Stubbs, or he would be here with me right now.
That's the longest pitch I've ever heard.
Yeah. I just wanted to get that out there because he was so excited.
What's the name of their band, baby?
Western Youth.
Western Youth.
Western Youth, okay.
Yes, they're
cool.
an official Southwest band too. So anyway,
that's awesome.
I do love you very much. I'm a huge fan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So
Thank
nice
you.
to meet you.
This portion of the program brought to you by Ancestry.com.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Hey, I'm Molly from Nebraska.
Hi, Molly.
I was wondering if you could share a little bit how sobriety has affected your career and your life. I've been in a program the last 6 months here in Austin, and so I'm really inspired by what you've done.
Well, thank you, and congratulations.
Thank you.
Here, here.
I mean, it's such a personal thing, sobriety, for each person, and I've always been very private about it because I like a constant experience where everyone feels like they can do whatever they want to do. It's got nothing to do with me, so I've always been very, very private about it. Because it's attraction rather than promotion, for anybody that needs it, and it was just something I needed because I'm just alcoholically wired, and I wished I'd gotten sober many, many years before I did, but at the same time, it is what it is, and I'm glad that I finally got here, almost coming up on 12 years later. But it's I think for me. It's made it possible to do all the things I do. I know that. I know I wasn't at my full potential, and that's what was starting to get to me, was that I was enslaved, is what I was, and living a very, very small life, and for me, my experience was that, that first step they always talk about, that my life had become unmanageable. And I'm like, nope, my life is totally manageable. If they'd said, and your life had become a piece of shit, I would have got to that first step much quicker. But I just made my life smaller and smaller and smaller so it could stay manageable. And at some point I realized my life sucks. It is tiny. It used to be so much more colorful, and it's just tiny now. And I just got to that point where it was time, and I had a very loving wife who helped me with that, and friends, and the willingness from me, first and foremost, to know I needed help and was ready. But it took me a long time. But it's freed up my creativity exponentially. Probably less fear. That's one of the big things. Like, I can dare to suck. It's okay. I can suck at something. It doesn't bother me. Someone can not like something. That doesn't bother me as much as it would have. I mean, of course it hurts, but I can move past it much quicker. And I show up for things, so that's good.
Yeah. Yeah.
But congrats on your sobriety.
Thank you.
Right. Yeah.
All right, so we're running down. We got 2 minutes. Go ahead.
My name's Sylvia, and I live in Dallas. And
Hi,
I just
Sylvia.
want to say how much I really appreciated your guitar lessons.
Oh, thank
that
you.
You gave on the CDs. My sister bought the guitar.
Uh-huh.
And she had the box set that had all the DVDs in it, and
Right.
I was able to play along with those.
Oh, cool.
And I just wanted to let you know that I really appreciated that, and I learned a lot, and it was just a really cool thing to do, and I like your way of teaching, your energy.
Thank you.
Your whole vibe on the DVDs was great.
Thank you very much.
And I just hope you plan to do another set. 'Cause I
Yeah,
really went through all
definitely.
this.
Yeah, stay with it, too. Are you still playing?
Yes, I
Yeah.
am.
Good job.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Last question.
Hello, hi, I'm Judy Tint, I'm from New York.
Hi, Judy.
And as far as I know, we're not related, but I'll have to go and check. I'm a big believer in what you talked about music putting good into the world, and I've always believed so profoundly in music being able to change minds and change hearts. And we're living in such odd times, particularly in this country, of such divisiveness and such anger. And I'm just curious, as you're writing and as you're playing, if this informs the statements and what you're trying to put out, because music is one of the few things that can bridge the gaps between people. And that's always struck me as something you do in general. I've seen you live, and you just have such a warm and positive space, and I'm just curious if the times we're living in are impacting your songwriting and how you see the function of music.
I think the mob is very dangerous, and it's just that constant balance between being true to myself, not letting the mob kind of rule, because the mob just drifts from, you know, cause to this cause, over to this cause, over to that cause, and we're going to go attack all those people now who do this, and then we're going to call out all these people, and everyone jumps on bandwagons, and half the people on those bandwagons don't actually know what they're doing. They just, yeah, let's go burn the witch, you know, and it's just a very dangerous time where the mob is just running rampant. And I know that Nick and I are just trying to live a life removed from all of that and just kind of just calm. You know, everything is so, there's not much time for thinking anymore. Everyone just reacts so quickly, and I think I'm trying to not get caught up in reacting. I think that's, again, sobriety. I'm trying to learn to respond instead of react, which means to pause for a second, which I've never been very good at, but yeah, it's a beautiful thing to be able to just time out for a second, you know, and let's talk about this again tomorrow instead of getting on the email chain, you know, and but in regards to my music, again, I still feel I love the opportunity to go out and play music, because it just, it's audible incense, isn't it? It's like firing up a stick of incense or a smudge stick or something.
And it's like that shared experience.
Yes,
people coming from all different backgrounds, and you may be, you know, rocking out, watching you play, standing next to someone who is politically completely opposite from you, but you are sharing this experience.
Well, and the other thing is not only hanging with my like kind as well. That's also dangerous. Otherwise, I'm just stuck in this little loop of agreement and consensus. And we were talking earlier, my manager and I, about part of the problem with hipping people to music via data is tricky, because it's like, oh, if you like that, you would also like this. Well, that seems to just ensure that I have a very small palette of music being offered to me all the time. Where do I find an artist that I never knew anything about and is nothing like any music I've ever heard before? Who's going to hit me to that person? So the data thing is tricky with music. I segued into something very different there, but it's all part of this trying to make everything ones and zeros right now. And where do you fit? I'm like, well, I fit in a lot of places. Can I fit in a lot of places? No, not allowed to. I'm like, oh, well, you know, I like to think I'm genre fluid.
Yeah.
Is what I am. So.
Well, certainly lately. That's for sure.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So here's what I know. Thank you so much for taking the time to have this conversation. Just terrific. We wish you nothing but the best with the record.
Thank you.
And I know you're going on tour at some point. But thanks for joining us. Ladies and gentlemen,
pleasure.
Keith Urban.
Thank you for coming in, everybody. Thank you.